Today's lesson is on solving proportions, and a proportion is an equation that states two ratios are equal. A ratio is a fraction here. So this is a ratio, and a proportion is when you have two ratios with an equal sign in the middle. So ratio, ratio, proportion. Cross product, product means multiply. So you might know it more as cross multiplying, but cross product. In a proportion, A over B equals C over D, the cross products would be AD and BC. And these are equal to each other. So when you have a proportion here, what you can do is you can cross multiply those, make it A times D is AD, multiply those, B times C is BC, and you're going to put that equal sign right in between them. So those will always be equal. Now we're going to use that knowledge as we're trying to solve for one of those letters. If something's missing, we're trying to figure out what's supposed to be there. So we're going to use the cross product property, cross multiply. We're going to multiply those together, and we're going to multiply those together. Now it doesn't matter which one you do first, as long as you're doing each of them. So I'm going to go ahead and do 4 times x first. 4 times x is 4x. And 3 times 12 is 36. Put an equal sign in the middle. What you do from there is solve for x. So it says 4 times x. Opposite of times is to divide. Divide both sides by 4. And you get x equals 9. You can check that answer by dividing 4 divided by 3 and seeing what that decimal is. Taking 12 divided by 9, seeing what that decimal is, and making sure they're the same. So that's a way that you can check these answers. Multiply here. Y times 5, we're going to write it as 5y. 3 times 4, so equals 12. And to solve this, we're going to divide both sides by 5. And we get y equals 2.4. I always like to do the one with the letter first. So 3 times b is 3b. 5 times 11, 55. To solve for b, we divide by 3. Now that's going to give me a funky decimal. So you can just leave it as 55 over 3. That's an exact answer. If you try to make it 18.3 repeating, that's not an exact answer. So that's not a good answer unless they're asking for an estimation. You want to leave this as 55 over 3. This one we were allowed to write as a decimal because that decimal stopped. It was 2.4. I did not round anything. Again, I like to do the ones with the letters first, so I'm going to do that one first. So 3x equals 12 times 5 is 60. Divide by 3, and we get x equals 20. So we're going to step it up a little bit, and we're going to add in plus signs and minus signs. So we've talked before about there's something imaginary in these types of problems, and those imaginary things are these parentheses. Anytime you see a plus or minus sign, you have to remember that there's parentheses there. That's really important you do that here, because as you're cross-multiplying, as you're multiplying those two together, you're multiplying b minus 8 times 4. Now at 4, I like to put in front, because you see distributive property a little bit better when you put it in front. Same thing here. As you're multiplying those two together, you're multiplying 5 times b plus 3. And as I've already mentioned, you need to distribute in these. So 4 times b, you get 4b. 4 times 8, you get 32. 5 times b, you get 5b. And 5 times 3, you get 15. Now you have b's on both sides. We have to move them to the same side. You can choose to move the 5b or the 4b. I like to move the 4. So I'm going to subtract 4b over because the 4b is positive. 1b here, 1, or you can just write b. And last step to get the b by itself is we have to get rid of that 15. So we're getting rid of our addition and subtraction here. So b equals negative 47. Again, if you want to check your answer, just put negative 47 right here, and put it right here, and make sure those two fractions have the same decimals. Same thing on this, we're going to multiply those together, then we're going to multiply those together. This has one group of imaginary parentheses. So n times 6, we're going to write 6n. And this one is 5 times 2n plus 4. Remember, there's parentheses. So distribute. 6n equals 10n plus 20. Multiplying that to both. You have n's on both sides. We've got to move them together. Now, normally I move the smaller one. But if I move this one, there's not going to be anything left over here. So I'm actually going to move this one this time. I'm going to subtract 10n. It is going to give me a negative number, but that's okay to work with sometimes. We don't want to leave something blank over here. Divide both sides by -4, and you get n equals -5. Same process on these last two. These are just more examples of the same things over and over. Multiplying here. 7 times x minus 3 equal to 6 times 5 is 30. Distributing. 7x minus 21 equal to 30. Add 21 to both sides. You get 7x equals 51. And then to get x by itself, you're going to divide both sides by 7. Again, this is going to give you a crazy decimal. Just leave it as 51 over 7. That's okay. It's okay to sometimes have decimals. Multiplying here, we get 2 times 2y minus 7 equal to 4 times, you do need to include that negative sign inside the parentheses, 4y minus 14 equals 4 times negative y is negative 4y. And then plus 20. You have y's on both sides. Again, I like to move the smaller one, so I'm going to move this one right here. And that's going to give me 8y minus 14 equal to 20. Add 14 on both sides. Getting rid of our addition and subtraction. Going through this much faster than before because we've done this so many times this year. Y equals 4.25. And that decimal is okay because it's a good decimal. It's stopped there, nothing's rounded. Now, how do we apply that to word problems? A portable media player has 2 gigabytes of storage and can hold about 500 songs. A similar, that's where your equal sign is going to be. There's another fraction. Similar but larger media player has 80 gigabytes of storage. About how many songs can that larger media player hold? So we're going to write a fraction using this information. 2 gigabytes for 500 songs. Now I'm going to put a G here and an S here to represent gigabytes and songs so I remember where I'm placing numbers. Similar means equal to. And there's another fraction. Now, with the equal sign, if gigabytes is on top here, then gigabytes has to be on top here. Equal sign, they have to be the same spots. So we know it is an 80 gigabyte. That goes there. We're trying to solve for finding out how many songs there are. Now we're going to cross multiply. 2x equals 40,000. Divide by 2. And that means that larger one can hold about 20,000 songs.